Good morning, Dr. Rani.
Hello, am I audible? Hello,
Yes, sir.
am I audible?
Yes, sir. Now you are.
Now you are.
Welcome, Archana madam. Professor Archana madam.
Thank you so
Welcome
much.
to you.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining the meet.
It's my pleasure.
Thank you, madam. So, organizing team, please start the
Sir,
session.
yes, sir.
Yeah.
Very good morning to everyone present. I warmly welcome all of you all for the third session of the National Workshop on IPR. And our eminent speaker for today is Dr. Archana Chugh, madam, who's an associate professor at IIT Delhi. Dr. Archana Chugh, ma'am, is currently associate professor at Kusuma School of Biological Sciences at IIT Delhi. Prior to joining IIT Delhi, she was faculty at Rajiv Gandhi School of Intellectual Property of IIT Kharagpur, where she taught law of patents, biodiversity, geographical indications, entrepreneurship, and IPR management. She also served as co-coordinator of DST TIFAC, Women Scientists Training in IPR at IIT Kharagpur, and now also is actively associated with the scheme. She also conferred Microsoft Outstanding Young Faculty Award. She has worked at Patent Associate with Well IP law firm Remfree and Sagar. She is also qualified patent agent with the Indian Patent Office since 2002. She has granted and applied patents as well as several publications in the area of IPR in various journals of repute, and is currently focusing on governance of nanomedicine and synthetic biology. She will be sharing her thoughts on her topic, innovation and patenting approach for academicians. Ma'am?
Thank you so much for the kind introduction. It is my pleasure to be back again and, talking about a very important aspect, which I think we all academicians should be, aware of in these contemporary times. So I would be talking about the innovation and the patenting approach, starting with a little bit of basics regarding technology and knowledge. And then from there, we'll go on and, end the lecture towards talking about the milieu of entrepreneurship in the academic scenario. So just give me a moment. I'm going to share my slides with you, and then from there, we'll start. So I hope you're able to see the screen now.
Yes, madam. Yes.
Okay. So as I mentioned to you that I will be first, giving brief characteristics about the terms called knowledge, which we use so frequently about technology. And from there, we will talk about the R&D and how it moves towards invention and innovation process, and then how the portfolio is built up with respect to the intellectual property. And then comes the technology transfer, and of course, the entrepreneurship, which go parallelly. So as we know that in the late 18th and 19th century was known to be the Industrial Revolution, which was followed by the age of electric and electronics in the 20th century. And the late 20th century, in fact, was kind of devoted to the information technology and biotechnology. And in this 21st century, we are living into the knowledge-based economy, where we will have predominance of bio-based economy. That is what is being, predicted. So as you can see here in this figure, you have many terms like knowledge, wisdom, learning, creative idea. Actually, all these terms and a picture like this, all these are basically related to the properties of knowledge and eventually to the intellectual property. So these are the ones which are going to contribute towards the development of the IP portfolio for any individual or for any organization, including the academic institutes. So let us, think about if we have to count what are the attributes of knowledge. So there is a one Sanskrit shalok where it says that if you give knowledge, it increases. So same is true here as well, which has been mentioned here, that knowledge, of course, is inexhaustible. It improves and accumulates through its continuous use, and it is irreversibly transferable. So this is a very interesting characteristic, and through which, stopping the pilferage is very difficult. The spillage is very difficult. So that is why we have now these exit interviews and the bonds which are being signed, or the agreements which are being signed between the employer or the employee, especially in the private sector. And of course, it is reusable, it is reproducible at low or no cost. And of course, it is very difficult to dispossess. And that is why it is the irreversible transferability as well as the difficulty to dispossess it. So if you have a knowledge of something, you cannot unlearn it. It is just there with you. So it can be rendered, however, obsolete by new knowledge. And you can have a perfect control over it. So if you don't do the spillage, if you don't tell, codify, you can have a perfect control over it. That is, you can maintain secrecy. Now, this is a very important aspect, which in fact is not being covered very well in the intellectual property regime till now, in terms of the trade secrets. So trade secrets is an intellectual property, but it has not been codified or under the law. We do not have very specific regime, especially under the Indian scenario. So we will talk about it, but I'm sure you know about a case of Coca-Cola, that a secret has been withheld and has not been shared. So that is what is an example of a perfect control of knowledge. So once it gets codified, then it gets transferred. Knowledge could be expensive to generate. We all know that, who are into the research area. It could be a very expensive way of generating information, but it is still easier to regenerate or imitate or copy. And it is filled with surprises. It has negative depreciation value as compared to any other property. For example, the houses, the cars, they all have depreciation value, which can be highly positive. But the case of the intellectual property, the depreciation value remains negative. And of course, we can codify it in terms of writing, in terms of speaking, the language. All this codification of knowledge is possible. So as I mentioned to you, the transferability is possible, but it accumulates in our memories, and that is the reason it is difficult to dispossess. However, at the same time, it has extremely resource for value, wealth generation, and it has a huge economic potential. So that is the intrinsic or the inherent property of knowledge. And at the same time, it cannot be absolute. It cannot be therefore valued easily. It cannot be sold. It cannot have an absolute price tag on it. And the theft of knowledge happens in the physical form as well. But at the same time, there is inadvertent diffusion, as I mentioned, because it is very difficult to dispossess, and spillovers occur when, for example, a student from the lab goes to another lab. He's taking along with all the skills which he has gained during working in that particular lab. And at the same time, a student in general, whatsoever has learned during a class time, is going to take it forward to another class. So the spillovers are very inadvertent and very difficult to control. And at the company level, of course, as I mentioned to you, the exit interviews, they make sure that you are not going to share the knowledge which you have gained in the other company for the benefit of the other company as well. However, it is a very difficult thing to control. It does happen, the spillovers does happen, or the leakage is bound to happen because if the human resource is moving from one place to another, the knowledge spill is bound to happen. So we have talked about knowledge, and knowledge, of course, is a very broad term through which the entire concept of intellectual property has built up, and it remains the key word for technology defining, for defining what is intellectual property. And at the same time, knowledge is something which is very important and a contributor to the entire economy of the world. So technology I called as a sub-part of knowledge, and I also find that it is a magic word. It is a very specialized form of knowledge or intellect, and it is a very strong mechanism or a medium for bringing the socio-economic change. We all have felt the effect of technology regularly in our lives, especially in the last half decades, where we have had, the handsets which moved from we used to have a primitive form of the mobile phones, and then we moved from there to the mobile phones. Now we have the tablets, we have the laptops. So I don't know if you have seen the older machines, the computer machines. They were so heavy, and now you can see a very small devices which have a high memory as compared to the previous ones. So there is an incremental addition in the technology, and at the same time, there are breakthrough technologies which have been disrupting in the society. Technology, I consider, is a very important catalyst for development. We all have felt it, in these recent times. And technology has the potential to induce changes in all spheres of human life, whether it is agriculture, whether it is health, whether it is technology in the other fields. And technology, in fact, as we define it, is a man-made phenomena which has multiple influences with multiple variables in it. In nature, yes, technologies are happening, we define them, but the technology which I'm talking about today is in context of intellectual property, and this is therefore considered as a man-made phenomenon. And of course, it is a very dynamic process, which is basically aiming always at satiating the human hunger for knowledge as well as comfort. So it is a very commonly used term now. We all know that. Even a layman, can use this word technology maybe, at least 2-3 times in a day when we are talking about mobile phones, or even children use this term technology nowadays very frequently. So interestingly, the rate of technology is actually directly proportional to the rate of economic growth. That is what has been observed. And technology, although at the same time it brings its own benefits and misbenefits. For example, the mobile phone, we all know, the computers, we all know, the laptops, we know, TV, we know that they have their own set of benefits which they have attributed to the society. And of course, the misbenefits also are also getting now exposed or enlisted. So we have to keep in mind that technology may have positive impact, but not always. It can have negative impact, and that is why I always say, all the stakeholders for understanding a technology should participate in assessing its impact on the society. So because technology has is a very strong vector basically to bring any socio-ethical changes and at the same time the environmental changes. So I think we all will agree at this juncture that these are the aspects which have been actually taken into consideration when all these laws are also being drafted. And that is why you will, as I move towards the other slides, you will realize that intellectual property took some time to gain the center stage, especially in India, for several reasons. That includes the socio-ethical changes and the environmental changes. And that is why the lawmakers have to keep in mind when they are granting any monopolistic right, that these two environmental factors as well as the socio-ethical cultural factors are taken into account. So there are various categories of technology. There could be technology which is just an object, good, or tools, which we have just talked about, mobile phones, computers. And there could be a process of installation technique involved in that. So it could be just a process. And a technology could be like, a personal know-how and the abilities of the workers. So these skills. So it can be a skill set. So there are various categories of technologies, and we all know that they emerge from if the place has a resources and the institutions. So technology is basically heavily dependent on resources, basically, in terms of the capital, money, and the human resources. Other terms which you will come across regarding technology includes new technology. Key technology means the core technology, and then there will be a high-end, a low-end technology. We all understand these are very commonly used terminologies, like up-to-date, what is the state-of-the-art technology, and the leading-edge technologies. The leading-edge technologies are the ones which can be actually disruptive technologies. That is even if there is no demand in the society, still they can make a place for themselves to exist. So when we have talked about technology, there are 5 stages in which a technological change or induction would take place in a given milieu. So these 5 stages are that first, there will be an advancement in the pure science. So when we are talking about technology or knowledge for that matter, I always say, we cannot ignore pure science. So when we are talking about that we are working in an applied area, we need to have our basics clear, and that is how the advancement will come. So the 5 stages include, first thing is that there are advances in the pure science, which leads to the invention. And we have to keep in mind the difference between invention and discovery. Whenever we are talking about intellectual property rights, we are not talking about discovery. that is not patentable. So invention is something which is man-made and has been developed new. So that is what, when invention starts getting commercialized or starts moving towards the steps of commercialization, it takes the form of innovation. And then, of course, comes the financing of the innovation and the acceptance of the innovation, that is the marketing. So these are the 5 stages of any technological change or progress to take place in a society. So here you can see very clearly that there are 10 types of innovations, as you can see here. This is called as the innovation wheel. And the technologies are, or the innovations are based basically on the configuration or what the company or an institute is going to offer. It can be in terms of product system, or it can be in terms of a product performance. And then, of course, how you're going to deliver it to the consumers. So all these things, they are a form of an innovation. You know, for example, if we just take Amazon, the success of Amazon, it's because how it is reaching, it's in the service sector, and the innovation is that how efficiently it is reaching to the customers and how efficiently it is dealing with the demand. So all these innovations are required at, you know, every small step, and they are causing the incremental innovation and, of course, the wealth generation towards the end. So how do we define innovation in general? Is that it is a term which covers invention to its commercial use, as well as it can include the improvements in existing technologies. So there could be 2 types of innovations. The major innovation, which is just pure science, but it is radically new. So it is something which is completely disruptive, breakthrough technology. You know, for example, we have the, we didn't have computers at all. So when the computers they came, we would call it as a major innovation. But then the incremental innovation is you have the laptops, because it was causing discomfort to sit. That is why, you know, in that posture, that is why the laptops they came. So that is a minor innovation. It is improvisation. It is applied science. So these, they exist together, major as well as minor. They exist together in a techno-economic milieu. So the success would depend upon what are the technical innovations that have been included and what are the economic advantages we are gaining out of it. So since now we have talked about very basic things, you know, starting from knowledge, which also includes intellect, wisdom, information, and then we talked about technology, and then we moved on towards invention and innovation. So in the IP chain, that is the intellectual property chain of activities, innovation stands second to creation. So creation is very important. Until unless we create mere idea, it does not form intellectual property. It has to get translated. It has to be reduced to practice. And that is where the innovation comes into play. So in the IP chain of activities, followed by innovation is commercialization. And once we have started commercializing, we will have, you know, the people who would be opposing the commercialization or marketing, and we will have competitors as well. So we need to protect. So that is why where the intellectual property rights would come into play. So protection, and then of course enforcement. If there is any infringement of your IP rights, then the enforcement will come into play. So we will talk about them in a little detail as we move on. So just keep in mind that we have reached here, and we will be talking about the protection, how it can be, our innovations, they can be protected. And that's where the intellectual property rights, they come into existence. And one of the major intellectual property rights includes the patents, which I will be focusing in today's discussion. We have several other forms of intellectual property rights, which includes the patents, which includes geographical indications, which includes designs. We have utility patents also in some of the countries. And there is a major difference between design and patents. Design is just mere structure or shape, whereas in the case of the patents, it is the functionality also, which is changed or improved, or it is innovated as compared to the designs. In designs are independent of the functionality. So that is the difference between patents and designs. which are of more use basically to the academia. And then of course, copyrights when we work with the softwares. So I will focus more on patents. So the patents, these are the ones which are monopolistic intellectual property rights, which are basically preventing the others or the competitors from using, selling, manufacturing of the particular process or a product. So it is a right which is granted by the government of a country. So it is very territorial in nature, just like all other laws are territorial in nature. And the term of a patent is 20 years from the date of first filing. So earlier you file, the priority you will get. However, the term would be 20 years from the date of filing. And as we know that the patentability criteria, we have 3 patentability criteria. The innovation has to be, or the invention has to be novel. It has to have an inventive step, which a normal person who is skilled in that particular field will not be able to think under normal circumstances, and should have a commercial application. So when you file a patent application, all these 3 aspects of your work are basically assessed by the examiner in the patent office. And whenever you file an application for the patent, it is better to show that it has a commercial utility. And also it is an inventive step, which will not be something very obvious to the person who is skilled in the state of the art. So as an academician, we might like to think, why do we need to protect our inventions? This has been a constant, actually, a debate in our minds and among the academia, that why do we need to protect our inventions and why we should have patents. We should understand that patents in the contemporary era, they are a very, very strategic business tool, not only for the industry, but also for the academia. They become basically the template for collaborations, and all these big companies which you see now have been successful. For example, Google, they basically emerged from the academic environment, and they can be a very huge source of revenue generation. And also, please keep in mind that sometimes the patenting is also done to raise litigation issues. And in the litigation issues, if you have come across the cases where Samsung has been involved versus Motorola, or there have been various cases, especially in the mobile phone industry, the strategic patenting is done basically to generate revenue out of litigation, because if any company which wins will have a wealth generation in millions of dollars. And of course, it could be used to build the strategic alliances, and it could be something where you would like to protect your invention from any infringement. You should have the freedom to operate, and also to enhance innovation and competitiveness. It also enhances the knowledge-based economy, and therefore it is very important, even for the academia, for the institutes to have their own patent portfolio. Therefore, we have to keep in mind the IP chain activity, number 1 and number 4, that is the creation and protection. They become very important. If you have created, it becomes very important to protect it in order to get the maximum benefit out of what you have created. So I'll just talk about the procedural aspects of patents, especially keeping in mind about the Indian scenario. Quickly, we will talk about that. In case you need to understand what is invention, it is defined under Section 2J and specifically under Section 2JA of the Indian Patent Act, which says that in invention, it can be a new product, it could be a new process, but it has to have an inventive step, and it will be capable of industrial application. This I have already mentioned to you. So a new invention is something which is not anticipated by publication in any form of any document. So this is the major mistake which the academia does, because we have the researchers who have to graduate, and therefore we are in a hurry. And also in many of the institutes, the filing process, even the patenting patent awareness is also not there. And that is where the major hurdle comes in the university milieu in India. So if you publish, it becomes very difficult to go ahead with patenting. So please make sure, if you see that there's something novel, even if you have a little bit of hint that something novel is going to come out of this piece of work, it is very important that you right away go for provisional filing of patent application, because once it is into the public domain, then it will basically attract non-patentability aspect to it. So that is why we have the provision of filing the provisional specification, and within 1 year you have to file the complete specification. And I think it is of great benefit to the academia, because while you're working in the research, you can go for the provisional and have the priority, and later within 1 year, if you have good results, you add on to it and file the complete specification. So as I mentioned to you, just like all other laws, intellectual property laws are also very territorial in nature. So if you have applied for a patent in India, it will not be workable. You cannot use that patent freely in USA. You have to file for a patent in USA to work for it over there. So it is very territorial in nature, just like all other laws are territorial in nature, because the laws are dependent upon the socio-ethical, cultural milieu. And just like any other intellectual property rights, these are negative rights. So patents are negative rights, means that they are basically excluding the other people from using it. So that is why they are called as negative rights. And even the geographical indications, which are considered to be very interesting and very relevant in terms of the Indian scenario, since we belong to a very agricultural and highly biodiverse country, even those geographical indications which are considered to be the community rights, because for example, if somebody has developed for example, there is winemaking, there is cheese making in France, which is being protected as a community right. So these are also negative rights. That means that nobody else besides that community can work on these handicrafts in India. So these are also negative rights. And then the patents, these are legally enforceable because these are granted by the government, and they have a limited scope and duration, which I think is a positive aspect for any intellectual property. So the government or the laws, they make sure that the monopolistic right is there with an individual or a community only for a particular period of time. After that, it comes into the public domain. I will give you a very simple example of this. Many patents that way have come into the public domain, and it has helped a lot in the healthcare sector, especially, as well as in the agriculture sector. And in the ICTs, we have more of the copyrights, and because there is software development, and that comes under the scope of protection under copyright. And the limited scope basically allows the other competitors or the other people to market the product. And that is how the price of the product goes down. Otherwise, during the monopoly, the price will remain higher. And that has a huge impact basically on the healthcare industry. So all the patent filing and prosecution is being done keeping into mind the Patents Act 1970, and it is also ruled by the patent rules in the year 2003. So a comprehensive e-filing is nowadays possible to do at the patent office, where you just online submit the documents, and basically this is to ensure that you have done it yourself, and then there is transparency, and it is very user friendly, and of course it is a green step. Most of the patent offices in the world, they have now done the provisions for the e-filing of the patent applications, and Indian Patent Office that way has been very, very active, and is actually second to none to the other countries. So who can file the patent? As an academician, you will think sometimes, there are complications how to file the patent. You don't have to look. If you think that you will be able to draft an application, the applicant itself, the inventor itself can himself or herself can file the patent, or you can engage a patent lawyer, you can engage a patent agent. Patent agent and patent lawyer, they are different. Patent agent, according to the Indian Patent Act, is the one who has a degree in science and bachelor's of science. Earlier that was not compulsory, but almost a decade ago they made it mandatory that you have to have a science background, and there is an exam which is conducted by the Indian Patent Office. Earlier it used to be conducted almost 6 months, every 6 months, but now it is 2 years or 3 years. So the patent agent is the one who has the authority to, who can be authorized basically to draft your specification, that is the application, and also file it. So, however, the lawyers are the ones with the degree of law, and at the same time, so they can practice in the court, so they can appear in before the judge and defend the case. So that is the difference between the patent lawyer and the patent agent. So they can be working individually, or they can be working with the IP law firms in India, and through them, many of the academic institutes nowadays, they file their patents by empaneling them in their panel. So as an academician, you should keep in mind that the invention must not be published in India or elsewhere, as I have mentioned to you earlier. And if it is in the prior public knowledge or prior public use within India, and it should not have been claimed before in any of the specifications in India. So these things we have to keep in mind before we go ahead with the patent application. Then how the grant of patents it happens. Once you have filed a patent application, it is there with the Indian Patent Office, and you have to request for the examination of your patent application. Earlier, it used to be that automatically the examiner would examine your patent application, but now you have to pay for it, because what was happening that many of the multinational companies, they were filing the patents and later on they were abandoning them. And in the meantime, the patent examiners had already put efforts in assessing the application and getting ready the first examination report, that is the FER. And the company would abandon it. So now what is happening is that once you have filed your patent application, it is there with the Indian Patent Office, it will be first published. And then after publication, it is open for opposition, that is called as pre-grant opposition. After that, it will be examined. So you have to make a request, you have to pay for it, and only then after your application would be examined and a report will be sent to you, and then you have to accordingly report. File your response. So you have the patent search would be done, patent drafting would be done, then you have done the filing, the entire procedure, it involves the examination and opposition. So once the FERs have been responded and there is no opposition, the patent will be granted. And once the patent has been granted, there will be, again, it will be open, it will be published, and it will be again open for opposition for 3+1 months. And after that, if there is no opposition, your patent will be sealed. But your date of term of the patent would start from the date of the patent filing. This we have to keep in mind. So 20 years from the date of patent filing, your patent term would start. So in the case of the pharmaceutical patents especially, we have greening of patents. So a small incremental innovation would be done, and also in the industry of the ICTs, there we have the incremental innovation. So one way or the other, the companies would like to keep their patents alive. So incremental innovation would be done, and your patent would be, if it is yielding good revenue or is generating wealth for you, you would try to keep it alive by greening it. So that is what is called as greening of patents. And our laws are trying to curb this practice of greening of patents through statutorily manners. So what does a part of the patent specification consists of? We have a title. Just like we write an experiment, there is a title or a paper is written. We have a classification system which is in place. There is an international patent classification system which is called as IPC. And then we have an abstract with the keywords, the description, And also please remember, when you are filing a patent, try to give as many as examples as possible, because that makes your patent specification very strong. And also include the drawings, especially in the field of engineering. Drawings play a very important role. Basically, all these are to convince the examiner, and at the same time, the examiner has to be convinced that whatever you have mentioned will be reproducible by any other person when it is in the public domain. And of course, the claims are the backbone of a patent. They are the ones which are going to determine the success of your patent. So the claims have to be drafted very carefully and skillfully, and they have to be defining the scope of the invention. And that is why the more examples you have, the more clarity you will have regarding the scope of your claims. So this is how a patent basically looks like. The patent number is given here. This is a United States patent, and the inventors are mentioned here. We have the inventors, and many times you assign. So especially when you're working in an academic institute, for example, if I am a patentee, I would assign my rights to IIT Delhi. IIT Delhi, because it is taking care of my finances for filing a patent and for maintaining a patent. So the institute becomes the assignee. And you can see here you have the application number when it was filed, and all the documents that have been cited. The field of search is mentioned here. International classification codes are mentioned here. For example, C12-9, which basically relates to the plant gene expression. So all these are basically the details. And then you can see here is an abstract. It also mentioned how many claims are there. And interestingly, what you will see is that the patent lawyers or the agents, the attorneys, basically they charge you per claim. So the more the claims you have, you're giving more money to the attorneys. So please draft your claims very carefully and precisely. It is not necessary to have a huge number of claims, but make sure that your claims are basically covering your invention well. So patents can be filed at the national level with the Indian Patent Office, IPO. And if you want to go for an international filing, you can take the route of the PCT. But however, you have to remember that there are no global or world patent. So there is no terminology called as global patent or world patent. We call it either we have got a US patent or an Indian patent or Chinese patent. So you can see that territoriality is attached to it. So what is a patent? Patent is a very important informative document with very vital information. It is a very important tool of innovation, and I think it is very important now to ask our research scholars not only to look into the innovations or novelty literature search to be done in terms of looking into the original articles or review articles. It is very important to ask them to look into the patents also. So nowadays there are many search engines which offer free services, like you have Google patents. Just search for it, and you will, with respect to your area, just give the keywords and you will be able to assess where do you stand. So it is a very important business development strategy. I would say it is a trade currency, basically, not only for companies now, it is a trade currency for academia, because there is a lot of emphasis on the startups now. So it is a very good currency, basically, to develop collaborations, also to get into the collaborations, not only between the academia, but also with the industry. And of course, it helps in taking us a very informed decision. Also, there are various applications of patents. Not only patent is a trade currency in the world of innovations, but at the same time, it does help us in technology forecasting. It is an important strategic tool for transfer of technology and, of course, innovations. And if you have done a valid, enough patent search, there are chances that it will reduce the R&D redundancy, and also, therefore, basically helping you to conserve your resources. and it has an economic impact. And there are many other, random impacts which the patent has, which we have to keep on assessing from time to time. But I always feel that our research scholars should be asked to look into any technology we are studying, we are trying to work on, to also look into the patent literature. It is important to note that the number of patents applied for and the ones which are registered, it is rapidly increasing every year, even in the academia, because more and more institutes are becoming aware of it. More and more institutes, they have the IP policies in place. And I think there has been an effort to bridge the gap where the academicians generally feared or did not understand, how would they go about the patenting processes. So still, however, unfortunately, we have low number of technology transfers. And also, we need to take the expert opinions and also the objective indicators or the systematic approaches to identify which is a high quality, or I would say a high yielding patent, that should be kept in mind. So I will just take few examples, how a patent has been studied for technology forecasting, for landscaping, and how it can even help the academia. I would say that, maybe you can look for the drones or the unmanned aerial vehicles on your own. And I would take another example here of nanobioelectronics. So nanobioelectronics can have the keywords like nanorobos. So you can feed the keywords as nanorobo, nanobot, nanoid, or nanite. And similarly, if we are talking about the nanobiosensors under nanobioelectronics, it will come as nanobiosensor and nanofactory. So these are the keywords which are related to nanobioelectronics. And this is how our search would be based. So here you can see the nanobots, and then we have the other aspects of nanobioelectronics, and you can see how many US applications are there regarding to the patents, and how many PCT applications, that is the applications that have been filed through the World Intellectual Property Organization by the United Nations. And here again, you can see that under how many of these applications are filed under US and PCT. Based on the classification system also, you can assess that how many applications have been filed in US as well as PCT. Sorry. And if you want to assess that, how many applications have been filed in terms of product, process, and or the composition, you can see here that this is how it is being studied. We have chosen two here, the US application and the other one is the PCT applications. We can have Indian applications, we can have Japanese applications, Korean applications, Chinese applications, European applications. So all these things can actually give you an idea about your area of interest, that how much progress has been made and where you think can bridge the gap. So this patent landscaping is extremely important for the development of any novel technology. And we have also studied here, for example, the term nanobioelectronics in terms of patenting in disease treatment. For example, nanobioelectronics has been used in cancer 23%, in spinal injuries 8%. So all this has also will give you an example of the application, the utility of the patenting regime in this particular area. So that is how I think even the academicians should move in the areas they are working on, to assess exactly, where the need is to fill the gap. So technology transfer is something which we can talk about now once we have understood what are patents, what are inventions, and how does the intellectual property laws they work, specifically the patents. Technology transfer, I consider, is basically an advocacy of an idea of change. That is, you are trying to bring some change in a particular area of interest. And I would say that it is a proactive form of advocacy of change by adapting to a technology. So who are the practitioners of technology? Who are the change of agents? Basically, the practitioners who practice the technology includes us, the teachers, the academicians, the trainers, as well as the marketers. How would we define technology transfer? It is a process by which research or other new technologies, these are transferred into useful processes or products or programs. So technology transfer, I'm sure we all as academicians have heard a number of times, and what mechanisms should be in place for an academic institution should be developed along with the IP policy. So as I mentioned to you, the characteristics of knowledge, technology transfer, we have to keep in mind the characteristics of technology. It is a replenishable resource, enhances productivity and competitiveness, and of course, it has a power to generate wealth. It also attracts new alliances, collaborations through either licensing or by selling, and also it helps in evolution of managerial philosophy and practice. So management is extremely important in the field of technology transfer. As you will see that the success of any technology transfer is extremely dependent upon the management of that particular technology. So according to the private sector view, technology transfer is considered to be a movement of technological and technology-related organizational know-how, basically which results into an enhancement of at least one partner's knowledge and expertise, and it strengthens the other partner's competitive position. So if we enter into technology transfer, for example, if we are getting any technology transferred from US to India, both have to have a win-win situation. So one place will have basically the gain of the knowledge and the expertise, whereas the other one would be able to generate wealth out of it. So we have to remember that technology transfer is not something which will happen only towards the end. It can occur at all the stages of innovation processes, I would say. So it can occur at the R&D level once you are doing research and development, and especially this happens in the academic environment, that you enter into collaboration with other universities or the industry at the R&D level, or it can happen at the design stage or production engineering or while manufacturing or marketing. So at any step, as you see, the technology transfer can occur, and it may involve multiple transfer steps, just like any innovation process, which can happen at any of these stages. So the technology transfer is not a single step transfer, it can be multiple steps involved. So while we are practicing technology transfer, we know that training becomes an integral part because the transfer has been done. So to the company or to the organization where the transfer has been done, the training becomes very important to understand and then to practice that technology which has been transferred. So there are key things which have to be kept in mind. One thing is important, that is the identification of the user's need. So even when in the academic milieu we are working with, in any of the area, we need to know what is required in the society or what is required by a particular industry if we have an alliance with an industry. So we prepare questionnaires, we do the market research, we go for the direct contact with the people who are requiring that kind of technology transfer. And then there is an information exchange, which can happen through videos or manuals, and then implementation of research findings, which can take place in terms of licensing, which comes under the law of the contracts. And then we have training and marketing. Then, of course, you give the feedback to the developers and manufacturers. So all this is basically helping us in practicing the technology transfer in an effective manner. Just like law is territorial in nature, technology transfer also we have to keep in mind is very territorial in nature. And I have seen that the ICTs probably may not have that territorial character attached to it, but the healthcare technologies and the agricultural technologies, they have a huge influence of the territorial character. The market size will depend, basically, indicate the success of the technology transfer. what is the skill set available to the team where the technology transfer has taken place, and how the management is going to practice that technology transfer. So the managerial styles are very important. And how much competition is there? Is there any need to diversify the technology? What are the taxation provisions? And also, what are the environmental factors? What are the cultural values? And also the adaptation capacities. So as I mentioned to you, in terms of ICT, probably it is not that difficult, but when it comes to the agricultural or the healthcare technologies, the adaptation becomes very important. For example, if any medicine has been checked and has been approved by FDA, in Japan, you cannot use that medicine without testing it on the Japanese population because of the different physiology parameters which need to be checked in the Japanese population. So these are certain things which determine the success of the technology transfer. So even when we are doing any technology transfer, we have to keep in mind the territoriality would be basically a major indicator for the success of that technology transfer. So the R&D organizations now we can talk about, and of course, as the universities and the institutes or the research-based charities, they are an important part of R&D organizations which are involved in developing any technology and bringing it to the market. Then, of course, we have TBCs, that is the technology-based companies or the technology-based firms. And then, of course, the large companies, they have their own R&D, and the pharmaceutical companies, they have their own R&D, and their main motto remains to generate technology, use technology, and derive value of information. So the process goes like creation, transfer, and then commercialize. So what could be the role of in-house R&D, which is very important in terms of the academia milieu? So in simple words, technology transfer is basically implementation of your research findings. It is a core element to the innovation process. And larger firms in India, unfortunately, they have less or no R&D. So that is what has been found in non-industrialized and semi-industrialized countries. Whereas in the case of the industrialized countries, which includes US and Europe, the larger firms, they have very strong R&D. But here in India, unfortunately, still most of the IP is being created from abroad. And here, the MNCs are just filing the patents. The innovations are taking still abroad, unfortunately. So how does the technology transfer takes place statutorily? There are various agreements which take place. One is called as the PCA, that is the pre-contractual agreement, which includes the memorandum of understanding, which is very common with the universities and the institutes. Then the letter of intent, there is a term sheet or the heads of agreements. And then, of course, we have the confidentiality agreement. That can actually basically happen between the two universities, or it can happen between industry and the university or an academic institute. MTAs, that is the material transfer agreements, which is more applicable to the to biology labs, where we have the biological material which is to be transferred. So we have MTAs. And then, of course, R&D agreements, that this part of the research would be carried out with the industry and this part would be carried out by. So they are basically these agreements. These are defined on case-to-case basis. We have IP license agreements. We have IP assignments. And also, nowadays, there are agreements with the students. So once the student who has worked with you has the time now to move on to another place, you will enter into an agreement with the student, making it clear that whatever knowledge he has generated here, which is patentable, would not be shared in the other laboratory. And also between the with the faculty, also there is an employment contract. And also there are termination and settlement agreements. So all these basically are case-to-case dependent. But nowadays in IIT, we are actually observing that because since the BTech students we are observing, they are quite innovative and they come up with the new solutions and are interested in generating IP. So sometimes we do enter into agreements with the students who are working with us. technology transfer agreements, interestingly, have the potential value. We cannot have a real or present value because technology transfer is something which is a mediating process. It is not something which has culminated into something completely. So that is why technology transfer agreements, they only carry the potential value that we have to keep in mind and does not have any real or present value. So because it is very difficult to predict the commercial success of technology because of the reasons as I mentioned to you previously. So here I have just enlisted the industry return which we can get from IP, specifically from the patents. So intellectual property rights, basically they give heavy returns in pharmaceutical industry and computer software industry. The reason is that sometimes, as I mentioned to you, strategic patenting is done. And also, I always tell it to my students as well, that even if you have negative results, they are very important. And specifically in the industry, the negative results can also be actually beneficial for you if you don't reveal it to your competitors. Let the competitor basically spend time over it. And in the meantime, you know that you have this thing is not working and you move to other direction. So even that is also considered to be a strategy. And the industry return from IP comes from innovations in terms of hospital instruments, devices, and chemicals, and followed by industrial machinery, and then followed by food and cosmetic industry. This data I'm showing you in terms of basically to give you an understanding that how intellectual property has basically dominated the US firms. It has been found that 91% of the US firms, they have their intellectual property in place, they have their own portfolio, and 62% of them are either protected by patents or copyrights, and 30% of them, they have licensed IP to others, and that is a source of wealth generation. And in fact, it has been found even the academia, all these Stanford University, MIT, all these are heavily involved in licensing the IP to the industry, and that is how they generate a lot of money. In fact, what is said is that Europe makes science, US innovates, and Japan commercializes. Status of India is still not clear. I think once the academia becomes really awakened and enlightened, understanding the benefits of the intellectual property rights in the contemporary era, that would bring a lot of benefit to the Indian academia as well as the industry. So there are various innovation models, basically, which are adopted. One is the demand pull, the other one is technology push. Demand pull generally is the one which will bring the incremental innovations. So because it is dependent upon the market need, you do the R&D and you do manufacturing and then you sell. Whereas the technology push is something which is coming from the basic science. It is a disruptive technology, and we all know, we have just talked about the computers as well. So computers themselves were basically a technology push, whereas the laptops is something which is a demand pull. So the IP portfolio creation is very important once we have talked about technology transfer, and also we have talked about the inventions and innovations. The portfolio creation is being done by first doing the assessment of a technology in terms of patent mining. So you look at the patents, how many, like we have just studied about the nanobioelectronics right now, and I requested you to look into the unmanned aerial vehicles or the drones, that how many patents are there in different IP regimes. So then we do the patent mapping, and then we do the R&D design, that how we should proceed. And market survey is also done in order to assess the need, what are the competitors, what are the existing technology gaps, and what are our priorities, what are our targets. So that is what helps us in building our IP portfolio. So the basket of IP portfolio management consists of not only the patents or the copyrights or other IP forms, but also it involves the strategy. So you need to have various stakeholders in a company or in your academic institute to be in place. It's better to have an economist, to have a lawmaker, a part of the IP policy making, and also the strategies that should come from the different divisions of the institute. The IP policies, what are the IP valuation, IP audit, due diligence, and insurance. These are the areas in which India is still developing, I would say. IP insurance is, of course, against the infringements. So this is also a huge revenue generating area now. So the IP management toolkit basically helps in reducing the redundant R&D activity. So as I always mention, that one should ask the research scholars basically even in an academia milieu to look for the patents as well in that particular technology, because it will reduce the redundancy in the R&D activity, and hence it will help in saving the money. Also, identify the patent infringers rapidly. The ones who are potential patent infringers, they should be identified. And also share technologies among R&D, market IP to the buyers. So once a lab has developed something, it should be ready to look into, contacting the industry and prioritize the IP portfolio to identify assets that drive value. And also informed decisions in IP regime is very, very important, because the maintenance of patent is also basically quite demanding. It is cost intensive. So until unless you are commercializing your IP assets, that is the patents specifically, just maintaining them is basically like maintaining a vehicle. So it will expire in 20 years, and if you have not been able to derive any commercial value out of it, you have only paid for it. So basically, rather than it becomes a drain on your resources, so that should be avoided. So we should make an informed decision and identify the particular assets which will basically bring value to you, and let other assets be taken care of otherwise by abandoning. Also, identify technology spin-off opportunities, which is extremely important in the academic milieu, where we have, nowadays technology parks which incubate these seed companies, and basically seed amount is given to these companies who are the spin-offs. So all these, as I mentioned to you, Google was a spin-off basically. So most of the companies which you see are flourishing now, they were basically the spin-offs of the universities. And they also determine the economies of the IP enforcement. So it is very important that we evaluate the commercial aspects at the embryonic stage of the innovations. That mind, parallel to assessing that where it take you to in terms of commercial aspects, would actually always help in translating or bringing more translational value to your inventions or innovations. So how do you maintain an IP activity in the university environment? One thing very important is to have a robust IP policy of an institute or academia, and also to have an empanelment of patent attorneys, carry out as many technology transfers as possible. There should be a support from the top mid-level management. So that means the process of inventing to transforming it into and then commercializing. I think at all levels, everybody should be able to appreciate the intellectual property regime. And then only this kind of a change can come in the academic environment. We should have awareness programs, just like we have this one. I think these programs are extremely important for all the generations to have. And also identification of inventions. So from time to time, there should be identification of the inventions. There should be meetings, or there should be patent clinics where even the students can participate, so that the inventions can be identified in their embryonic stages only. Also, incentivization of the for the inventions is one thing which is many of the universities are doing now. Incentivization in terms of like when you are publishing a paper nowadays, you have article processing charges, or to participate in the international conferences. All these things are being taken care of. So that comes as the incentive system for the inventions. Also, there should be dedicated budget which should be placed for the sustainability of the IP activities. So use of the external, oh, sorry, I just lost it. I'm extremely sorry. I think I lost. Yeah. So sustainability of the IP activities in terms of the budget should be there. And also we should have the external experts who are there within the panel, who are helping us to assess the kind of work which is going on in the university or an institute. They will give us the real picture. So we should have people not only from the in academia, but also from the industry. Generally, IIT system does have people from the industry who play a very important role in the IP portfolio building in the system. So as an academician, you should know what are the tools and avenues for IP commercialization. We have talked in great detail about technology transfer, which I think is a very important tool for the transfer of information technology from academia to industry. The acquisitions, selling, assignment, collaborations again between the universities, between the academia, and also the public-private or the industry, academia-industry collaborations are very important. Licensing is an important tool for revenue generation for any institute. The joint ventures, startups or the spin-offs are again, which will require money initially to establish themselves, but within 3 months you will come to know, 3 years you will come to know whether they are, they have developed their own mechanisms of sustenance or they will just fizzle off. And then of course, contract research, for example, if you have the machines or the equipments available and you can carry out the contract research for the other institutes, that's also a very good mechanism of developing the IP portfolio and to have the research paths. So most of the IIT systems, they have their own path where we incubate our own companies and startups, and within 3 years, the picture becomes clear whether they will be able to survive or they will fizzle off. So I think now it becomes very pertinent to talk about entrepreneur and entrepreneurship. For any entrepreneur, I would say it is very important to keep the eyes open and identify the opportunity, not only identification, but also pursue the opportunity beyond the current resources and also believe that this opportunity is achievable. It's not only desirable, but it is achievable. So an entrepreneur should be a person or would be a person who is risk seeking and has the willingness to face risk. We know so many entrepreneurs now. They are the ones who have been always at the edge, basically, to they are risk seekers. So failure they take as a symptom of opportunity, and they should have characteristics of a hunter, basically. So characteristics of a hunter who is hunting for opportunities and is alert, is monitoring inside the system as well as outside the system, and has the ability to think outside the box, is very flexible, is result oriented, and has a vision and is a concrete thinker. Besides these philosophical aspects, one should have the understanding of the market, the clients, the technology the person is working in, what could be the constraints, not only in the near future, but also what will happen after a decade if this technology becomes obsolete? Am I ready to move into a new path? So all these things, they have to be kept in mind, should be able to function, he should be able to operate, so should have good managerial skills. And most important, should observe real people in real life. So that is a very important characteristic of an entrepreneur. So what is expected out of an inventor or a researcher? Once you get, specifically when we are working in the laboratories where the chances of getting unexpected results are very high, uh, one should not get scared or deterred by such results, but rather one should have a thinking process in a different direction and think that this unexpected result, where would it lead me? What it would mean basically to exploit it, and how could I convert this into an opportunity, or how do I just go about it? How do I work around it? So this happens very frequently in the high-risk knowledge-based industries, specifically biotechnology and ICTs. And therefore, it is basically an entrepreneur who is actually an inventor, which becomes an entrepreneur and finally gets into the process. So the thing is that you should be able to convince first yourself and then mediate and negotiate and finally get into the profile of an entrepreneur. So there are 4 angels which are considered to be the 4S, they are called as an entrepreneur. So one is the sponsor who will promote your idea, will support your idea, will understand your idea, and then the shaper, who will help make innovation real. And also you need sounding board because there will be many ups and downs. So a person who knows your practicalities, who knows, has a better knowledge than yours, is a consultant. And also, of course, the experts, the skilled people, the specialists who are specialized in the skills. So these 4S, sponsor, shaper, sounding board, and specialists, they are considered to be the 4 angels for an entrepreneur. This is just to show you the entrepreneurial cycle, which generally in the academic milieu is being followed. You develop a skill, examine, generate, and then finally you protect and use all the available resources for your benefit. So there are certain special attributes which are being attributed to the entrepreneurial enterprise. One thing is that you should be amenable to change. So we know in the field of technology, the technology are at the risk of becoming obsolete nowadays very easily. So you should be able to resist that change or adapt to that change and bring new technologies. And you should be opportunistic, you should respond, you should exploit, and have the innovative skills to basically conquer new markets. That means if you have developed a new product, you should not hesitate entering into the newer markets and also winning new customers. So these are certain things which an entrepreneurial enterprise should keep in mind. However, there are certain issues which are associated with the any spin-offs or the entrepreneur enterprise, is that the IP ownership issues. It's better to make them clear. Even if it is coming from stemming out of a lab, the IP ownership issues should be made clear between the teacher and the student, the faculty and the student and the institute. Who actually owns it and how it is being protected should be clearly mentioned in the IP policies of an institute. It should be contemplated before the launch. And also, basically, one should not assume that the employer or the former employer is dumb or uninterested. Never ever think like that. Everyone has the potential, so therefore take the mechanisms, keep the mechanisms into place if you are developing anything innovative. And also, companies or academia, they should keep track of everything that is basically costing money. What is the labor cost of a project, the patent attorney fees, patent office filing fees. So as I mentioned to you, for the universities, we should keep a budget, a decided budget every year for the sustenance and maintenance of the IP portfolio. So once we have talked about the entrepreneurs and the entrepreneurship, we have the startups. There is a scheme which is being offered by the government of India, and startups basically, they generally have 1 or 2 patents in their pockets basically to start up with. And that is what either they have refused to license, but they want to use that innovation which they have protected by themselves to bring it to the market. So the schemes which have been offered by the government of India, they are promoting startups, they are promoting awareness on and protection of IPR among the startup companies. And the IP facilitation support is being produced by the impaneled IP facilitators, which are called as SIPP scheme. They are basically envisaged to provide support for the patents, design, and trademark. The government fees will be paid to the by the startup, and professional fees will be taken care of. That is, paying to the attorneys will be taken care of the government of India. And ownership of IP will remain with the startup companies, and all the details, if you're interested, are available on ipindia.nic.in. So there is something called a Startup India Action Plan, where we are finding actually a number of engineering students are showing interest in our system here. And we have come up with new schools, the School of Design and all those which are basically enhancing the innovative capabilities of or artificial intelligence among the students. So with this brief discussion over the various aspects and factors and parameters of intellectual property rights, um, with the special focus on how the academicians should think and are considering the intellectual property rights, I thank you very much for your kind attention. And if you have any questions, I will be very happy to answer. Thank you very much.
Uh, Excuse me, ma'am.
Yes.
Yeah, hello, ma'am. I had a doubt. So, in the beginning, as
Mm.
you said that some patents are geographic in nature. That is, you gave the example of cheese and winemaking in France.
Yes. Yes. They are
So,
not patents, it is geographical indications.
okay. So, if by any chance I enter the field of food technology, so is there
Right.
any chance that I may research or work on the similar kind in India, or is it?
Yes. Yeah. Geographical indications is a very strong area in India. Like, you have a rasgulla from Bengal. There was a fight between Orissa and Bengal right now regarding the GI protection of Rasgulla. So there are,
Okay.
there is a reputation, characteristic, origin. These are important ingredients of geographical indications. So if a particular, for example, you have guava from Allahabad, so that is also a geographical indication, basically.
Okay, yeah.
Agra
Thank you,
Petha
ma'am.
is a geographical indication.
Yeah. So I request all the participants to please fill in the feedback form, which is given in the chat. And firstly, thank you, ma'am, for once again joining us in this second national level workshop for IPR.
Thank
And
you.
then I would really like to thank the efforts you took and to explain these concepts of technology, inventions, patents, the characteristics of technology, rules of R&D, and of course, these things are beneficial for all the professionals out there, but also for us budding engineers and technicians. I guess these things are really important to know from the basic, so we get an idea of where to start from, and also the entrepreneurship skills required, qualities required, and how to start a startup from an entrepreneur. So thank you so much, ma'am, for your time and your knowledge.
Thank you so much. Thanks. Bye for now. Thank you.
Yeah, participants, please fill in the feedback form and then you can leave the meeting.